we have been joined by uh, by educators across India to discuss specific aspects of the national education policy. This week, we are going to be discussing chapter 22 of the policy because we have already covered the entire 8 chapters pertaining to school education. So, chapter 22 of the policy talks about promotion of Indian languages, art, and culture in school education and also in higher education. But since all of us are related to school education, we will be focusing primarily on that aspect. We'll begin with conversing about that, but just to give you some idea behind how, the kind of questions people have, what I'm going to do is when people register for the program, we ask them to share some of the queries that they have about that particular chapter. So I think even before I get in the session, I'll go over those questions slightly. That'll give all of us a framework on what are the big questions that our audience has in their minds, and the panelists can then choose to address those questions as and when they feel like during the program. Let me go ahead and introduce quickly. We have with us Mr. Bala Subramanian, who is the chairman of the ICSL Board of Advisors, and he's the former director of academics with CBSE, a very well-known face throughout India, wherever school education is talked about. Thank you, sir. Thank you for being with us today. We also have Ms. Sita Murthy. She is the Director Education at Silver Oaks International School, Hyderabad. She is also the President of Association of Heads of IB World Schools in India and the Vice Chairperson of CBSE Schools Association in Hyderabad. I hope, ma'am, the Hyderabad weather is treating you well and you are happy. I know it's not a very you know great time to be there. I am unmuting all the panelists so that you don't have to request. So Sudhanshu, Bala sir, Kobi, can you? Yeah, okay, great. So thank you very much, Sita ji, for being with
Thank
us.
you. Thank you for having
Uh,
me.
we also have Sri Vidya Mauli with us. She is a principal at TVS Academy, a long career in school education, a very dedicated life spent. She's an MA in literature and is an English teacher. So I think that's a great relevance for the topic. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for being with us today.
My pleasure.
And both the ladies uh, on the show, on the panel, are avid trekkers also. They love nature, and I think they're all both planning to climb the Mount Everest very soon. But before that, let me give you a challenge of really addressing our questions and our audiences. So let me quickly go ahead and share with you what are the kind of questions that we have received um, from our participants. So Swati Guha asks, for example, how regional language and English language will go hand in hand for the students of senior secondary schools, senior secondary classes. Uh, Another question is from Asha Sharma: should Hindi be a compulsory second language for Indian students in foreign schools, or there are some exceptions to it? So we also are usually joined by teachers from the Middle East also. There would be a lot of people who have specific interests because they teach in the Middle East. Deepika Srivastav asks, how can we do the promotion of Indian language in school education? So how do we promote Indian language? Swati Guha has another question: how will regional languages and English language be able to bring out holistic development for the students of this era? Um Sabita Umar Hamza asks how to instill a spirit of Indian art and language in schools abroad. You know, how do you, because they might not be connecting to Indian languages very much. Uh, Bhanu Pant, he's a principal from one of the schools, and his question is it that India is undoubtedly a land of rich heritage and culture? However, there is a lot of diversity and regional dogmatism prevailing everywhere. Is it possible to encourage Hindi in South India or say West Bengal? How do we address that? Adiba Wasim is a teacher in UP, and I think she wants to know how to improve the quality of learning of Hindi for non-Hindi speakers. We have a lot of students who have zero exposure to Hindi at home, yet are expected to follow the curriculum meant for UP and Delhi. So that's a question. There are a lot of questions about language, I think. Uh, but then we come on to the culture part of it. How to include our traditions and culture in our daily lesson. I think that's a question. How do we do it? It's okay to celebrate, different festivals, but more important is how do we integrate that into our lesson planning and lecture delivery. Uh, Indumati Sugumar asks, how do we promote culture to pre-primary foundational years? So how do we do that? There are also some specific subject related queries that we have. For example, how do we do art integration in mathematics or literature? Then Tarun Mongia wants to know again, is ICT going to be a part and used to promote art and culture for multidisciplinary learning? How will we do that? J.R. Jacob wants to know how can we promote our age-old culture and tradition other than through art integration. So is there any other way to do that also? Or is art integration the only way to promote our culture and tradition? That's a good question because so much emphasis is being related to that. Um, then we have Rosalind Francis. How can we sustain and instill the idea, Indian values and culture in the students in the modern era of technology, where students are more inclined to westernized culture and education? And also, when parents, so this is not his question, but my question, when parents want, students to learn artificial intelligence, machine learning, coding, and here we are talking about let's take them to a tourist destination to show them the art and culture and the heritage. Are parents going to come back to you and kill you one day because you're not teaching coding? How do we handle that aspect? How do we handle parents expectation? The other two important questions, Sujata Kumar asks this: teachers are proficient in their subjects but need adequate training in integration of co-scholastic components into learning. In fact, retention is more with cross-curricular linkage. A capacity building effort has to be taken at the national level. Um, and then she talks about the recent ICSL program. Kirti Tolani also talks about this training of teachers. How does a child cope with all such combinations? That is, understanding the importance of all the Indian languages, arts, and of course the culture. Will it not be a challenge for educators also to make them understand, as many of the educators are in this field by chance and not choice? So they might not themselves understand India's art, culture, and languages. In fact, I am one of those mathematics teachers. I'm going to be very honest with my audience. I have, I would say, looking at the panel today, I would have very, very mediocre or maybe below mediocre understanding. I have never gone to Ajanta caves or Ellora, and I have never been to those places. So if you ask me to integrate the culture in a mathematics lecture for my senior students, I think the first thing I'll do is take LTA and start traveling across India. So I think these are some of the questions that we have. And my audience, I'm request you if you have more questions, just use the question and answer uh, tab on the bottom of the screen, and you can put your questions. E-Convo is all about conversations. It is not about promoting our own personal, achievements in the field of education, but it's about coming together and trying to understand what could be the possible implementation ideas that we have. So, having said that, given you a good idea of what uh, where our audience is thinking from, my first question actually would be about teachers. How do you think teachers can build a positive cultural identity among students, given the fact that they might not be themselves fully equipped with the knowledge, given the fact that there would be a lot of pressure from parents, given the fact that there would be a lot of stress on them to finish the syllabus, given a fact that at the end of the day, the principal is going to judge them based on the marks that are obtained by them in the board exam. So, given all these facts, how do you think the teacher would take steps to build that positive culture? So, I'll take that question first to Shri Vidya and ask her to start giving her inputs, and then we'll take the inputs of other people. Ma'am, over to you.
Thank you. Uh, I'm going to start by saying I'm a teacher by choice. And it's not that I became a teacher accidentally. I started as a middle school teacher, and then I evolved into a teacher of social sciences as well, because I had a passion for Indian culture heritage. So when Priya asked me if I would take part in this conversation, I said, though the time frame is it's a very short notice, I said yes, because these are things that I think we need to passionately pursue in our schools. If we say that we are not able to do it because we don't have time, I refuse to buy that, because we are able to complete our curriculum. We are able to do all the things that are outlined in the curriculum prescribed by the board, take children on trips. You mentioned Ajanta and Ellora. We've taken our students on a trip to Ajanta and Ellora where they did a deep study, not only connecting, history, they looked at even uh, art, Indian art, the kind of evolution of art in India. So if you look at, the teacher today, many of them are switching, their basic domain and coming into teaching because they feel they can make a difference. And many times what happens is our system, as we call it, imposes a lot of framework, and it curtails the interest, the curiosity of the teacher to integrate. I may be, ours may be an alternate school, but then, you find that art integration happens and integration of subjects happens. It is possible within the given framework. It's only that we as educators should pursue it with a single minded focus, and we teach what we are. So we need to allow teachers to identify their passion, to bring that into, the classroom. A teacher who's interested in music in my school brought in, the Indian classical music, the notations, and connected it with mathematics. So children came up with a theory that, the basics of Indian Carnatic music, which we call as Sarali Varsai and Janta Varsai, that children learn, that can be substituted with numbers, and it all has to add up to 36. That's the, understanding our 10-year-old fifth graders came up with. So, it is possible for us to create that interest in our uh, culture, in our heritage. And that does not mean you're giving away, the attention and focus that you need to give to curriculum. Students do exceedingly well. It's not that we allow our students to use this as some kind of a time pass. It never happens that way. You find that our students do exceedingly well in the board exams. They are well placed in life. And I can give you a track record of 30 years because I'm following my students who graduated from my school right from 1992.
So I think what you're saying is it's more of the mindset issue
Yes,
of the teachers,
of
and
the
I think we need to
schools.
of the schools also.
Yeah,
And
of
I
the
think it,
schools primarily, not the teachers.
right,
Because
of the
given
schools.
the choice, teachers would, be willing to experiment. There are interesting ways in which they would like to integrate their subject with what we call as co-scholastic. And for all this, there is time within the framework. It's only that we, as people who run schools, say, no, no, parents will not, give room for this.
So one of the things I think what you're suggesting is that the teacher can find contexts that are
Yes.
deep rooted in our language or arts or culture and use those contexts to deliver the core subject. I think that could be one of the ways. So my next question, Sita, to you is very simple. You are from the international school, okay, and you understand the community of the parents that send children to your school. Now, how do you think the parents would react to the fact that instead of focusing on what is required more for students to succeed on the global platform, vis-a-vis technology and vis-a-vis new ways of thinking, we are trying to root them into the different art forms in India, where they might want to actually learn samba dance and go to Spain rather than go to Bijnor and learn a folk dance. So how do you think parents would react to this change when people do that?
So, thanks for having me here. Very interesting question you posed to me. But I'd like to say like this, that international school, this word international is grossly misunderstood in our country. So the moment any school has this term called international school, it is understood as it is educating children to go out of the country or educating them with a syllabus or curriculum from another country. So first I want to dispel that. The second thing is why we are in international school. That's something I have explained for many years to the parent community, saying that international mindedness, which according to IB is other people with their differences can also be right. Other people with their beliefs can also be right. Okay. In a country like ours, 29 states, multiple cultures, we in our country need international mindedness more than anybody else. More than anybody else. So, in a scenario where every state has a border in their religion, in their culture, in their belief system, or maybe language, everything, I think there is some time back I heard this term schools are like lighthouses of the society. Schools have this primary responsibility of building that culture. But I will be doing injustice if I say building that culture because the culture was there. It is not that suddenly we are talking about the bringing back the culture. NEP is bringing back what was there in our schools in pre-colonial India. All the schools in pre-colonial India had this education system where children were to be educated about the local culture, language, and relationships, environment, ecology. NEP is bringing that back because all said and done, we had to catch the global wave. We cannot remain with one set of ideas. And that's the reason we went through this entire transition towards a technology based education. Well, it is time for us to now understand that yes, now that we have reached at a certain milestone, let's now make even culture, language, okay, belief systems to understand how it can build identity to the young people in our schools. I would not like to put the entire onus on teachers because teachers are the products of the same system. They don't fall off the sky, they don't grow on trees. They are products of the same system. So, how do you as a school. Now, if a school like how very well put by Sri Vidya, it is a school, what lens the school takes that will determine what the children in that school will learn. And if from top down and bottom up, everybody has a similar lens, then we can start talking about, okay, let's see how we will bring cultural identity as something that you need to be proud of in your classroom. Now let's have a discussion around it. Okay. All said and done, in the last 30, 40 years, everybody started acquiring an identity which is not native to them, speaking a language which is not native to them, behaving in a way which is not native to them. So the first thing a teacher can do or a school can do is let us, the people, the adults in the school, start feeling comfortable with our cultural identity. And that's when we can start having conversations with children, because this cannot be taught in a classroom. It is a conversation, and it is inviting children into that conversation that, do you feel like this? How do you feel about what your grandmother says? How do you feel about the festival celebrated at home? What is it that makes you feel? Because this cultural identity is something which I find very interesting. Long back, I was in a group of educators from different countries, and this question was posed to us: what does culture mean to you? Oh, 100 different questions, but one answer that I really found interesting was one Irish lady who was in the same group. She said, for me, culture is that bread my grandmother bakes in the kitchen in our Highlands home. Okay, so for everybody, it is different. First, we adults in the school have to understand what is culture, which culture are we talking about, and how do we build that cultural identity, a self-worth, a self-respected children. So it depends on the entire group in the school to build that culture.
So I think what you're saying, Sita, is very true. I mean, and I'm really very happy that you're bringing this point out, that we really, as schools and as teachers, we really cannot practice a different culture in the school and teach something else, because students are going to be learning as to what they observe. So if really we need to link, create, I would not say link, but I would say create a stronger bond between our students and the Indian culture and the heritage and the languages and everything and the art form. I think this will have to reflect in the school's culture itself.
That's right.
And I think the first step would be to change the school ecosystem, the way everybody thinks about culture. So that's one question I would like to put to Bala sir. So what kind of systemic changes, or what kind of changes within the school's ecosystem might be required for any school who wants to implement this recommendation of the policy in their school? So, what are the kind of steps they would have to take?
Uh, I thought, to be very honest with you, I don't think the system has any time stopped people integrating knowledge. What has happened over the period of last 30, 40 years, we have looked at knowledge more at the disciplinary level rather than knowledge as universal, right? And therefore, we decided that the physics means nothing to do with chemistry, chemistry means nothing to do with biology, and therefore, really, we dissected it, right? Thanks to the new education policy, it is a great disruptor to the policy of education, what you have been following. And we are now, breaking the iron curtain between the scholastic and co-scholastic activities and trying to integrate a number of things. As pointed out by the other two people, it's very important to have a change in the mindset of the people in the school system. Neither CBSE nor any other board has asked people to have a mindset, but that was education has always been consumer driven, right? What has happened was that if a school coaches students for IITs and others, parents preferred it, right? There was a time when the technology was showcased, people thought was a good school. So good school was branded, right? Good school was not identified by a practice, but it was by more its marketability, right? So there comes what is called, pointed out the internationalism, what we talk of, as Sita ji pointed out, globalization, internationalization is a set of mind. And that's exactly what we had in our yesteryears when we went to the school. The family was a great source of integration. Where, a farmer who never went to a school possibly had so much of intelligence, integrated thinking, which others didn't have, right? And we promoted intelligences of different kinds. For example, think of M.S. Subbulakshmi, who got the the greatest civilian award. Which college she went for learning? No. So knowledge was interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary, and integrated at its basic level. But we dissected it, and therefore, because we wanted a doctor who will, do the right eye and the left eye, we started, personalizing knowledge rather than classifying knowledge. We started personalizing the knowledge. I think that's irony, and I'm happy that this particular situation has come. Now schools will be no with left sorry, schools will be left with no option but to integrate knowledge. As was rightly pointed out, the mindset of the teachers has to change. You said about the mathematics teacher and the art. I can give you an example of math teachers very recently who took music and mathematics as a project and got an international award over that. So I think it's quite possible to consider knowledge as a piece of knowledge, and there we have to break the iron curtains of the lesson plan. What is a we impose an objective on the child. That is the irony of Indian education system, right? We I always say we tend to cost learning. Learning can never be cost, right? What we need to do is what is the outcome of learning, and that is what will be pursued. And I think the policy is a great disruptor to the kind of education. The schools should take advantage of it. And as was pointed out by Ms. Srividya, you have to, as question was raised, you have to train the teachers to change their mindset. I think that is a primary job at this point of time.
Yeah, but I also feel that's probably the most challenging job because, changing mindsets is not something. So I think this whole transition is not going to happen from tomorrow, but it's going to start and it's going to take us another 5 or 10 years.
Abdul, I disagree. The reason being is you let the teachers be what they are. What we now do is that you tell them what have you done in the first period. We want you to see whether in the lesson plan every point one, point two, three is being done. That doesn't. That's not the way of pedagogy. That's not the way of curriculum. Right?
Right.
Curriculum and pedagogy evolves in the class. Right? And that's the core role of a good teacher, a passionate teacher. We kill the passion of not only the students but also the teachers by chaining them with the curriculum. That's a problem.
Right. I think so. So it's more required from the top, from the management side and the administration side, and start giving autonomy to teachers in the classroom,
Absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
then let them just do justice with the holistic view of education. I think that's one of the big changes that would happen in the education. Srividya, I have one question because there were a lot of questions that came from the teachers on languages. So from culture, I'm gonna move to languages and then we'll start taking questions from our attendees also. Now, in Article 22.5, right? One of the things that the policy talks about is the need to preserve endangered languages. Okay, that's what they're talking about. That a lot of our languages, we have over 220 languages, and 197 of the Indian languages have been endangered, have been classified as endangered languages. Now, I was also looking at a news where United States is also finding this problem of endangered languages. Okay, because some of the Red Indian, the old Indian languages, they are now getting lost, and the languages are going. Now, how important? So I have two questions. How important is it to save endangered languages for a country? This is more of a philosophical question. How important it is for us to do that. And the second is, if I do not speak that language, why the hell should I be worried about it? Because I've never used it. And therefore, why should a person who doesn't speak an endangered language, well, it's gone, it's gone. So why should we all work towards preserving those languages? Over to you, Cyril.
Uh, okay. Since you said it's a philosophical question, let me take a philosophical bend. Why does a language become endangered? Because, we discourage the use of it and we superimpose another language. Thereby, whatever we call today as an endangered language becomes endangered. I remember a time when I went to school, if we spoke in the local language, we were asked to pay a fine. That was the kind of system that was there maybe about 40 years ago, where if you're going to an English medium school, that is the only language you speak. So communication is not important. You need to speak only in English. And if you look at the way in which we teach languages, we don't allow the children to savor any language. We don't start with oracy. We don't start with encouraging them to listen and speak in a language. Straight away, we start introducing the structure of writing, and that I think becomes a killjoy. You start introducing the rules of grammar. This is how it has to be written. The mechanics of writing becomes, it takes over center stage. And actually communicating, because what is the purpose of any language? Language is a mode by which we express ourselves, by which we make ourselves understood, by which we communicate with others. And we actually negate some languages by our hidden messages saying, speak in English, right? So we constantly keep saying one language is superior to another. This is not something that the child comes with when it comes to the class. It is we as adults, we as a society that, kind of builds in a child. And then later, a child would love you play music from a language the child doesn't understand. The child is able to enjoy it. To some extent, it's also able to interpret from the tone what could be the kind of feeling that is expressed. But we try to say, no, you're not expected to look at all these things. You're expected to tell me what ragam this is. There, I kind of impose my views. The child's voice gets stifled. The same happens with all our languages. Interestingly, Hosur, though it is located in Tamil Nadu, Tamil is not the dominant language of that place. You have people speaking Telugu, you have people speaking Kannada, you have people also speaking Tamil. So you find that we had to, adopt the multilingual mode when we wanted our children to express. We make a very conscious effort to see that we don't pick children from just one strata or one group in society. So there was a child who didn't know a word of Tamil. Nobody at home spoke to him Tamil. He came from Orissa because his father took up a job in Hosur. He moved here. But 3 months into his kindergarten, he was communicating in complete sentences for about 3 to 4 minutes in Tamil, because we start with oracy. For us, the need to express in whatever language the child feels comfortable.
So that is the respect for different languages.
Yes.
But I, as a non speaker of a language, right? Why do I want all these endangered? Why should the policy worry about it?
Sir, you spoke about you being a math person. You said your background is math. But
Right.
why are you interested in what is happening in science? Why are you interested in what is the way in which somebody is teaching language? It's because, there is an interconnectedness. It is we as a society, we as adults who impose, as Dr. Balasubramaniam said, we are the ones who are imposing those boundaries. We build walls. Instead, we need to build bridges. We need to make children understand the connectedness. Once they see the connectedness, India is famous for its Vasudeva Kudumbakam, which means the whole the entire mankind is in some way connected. Why are we saying that this is, an endangered language? Don't bother about it. How did it become endangered? Because we discouraged use of it. So the more children get exposed to that there is a language like this, it has this kind of beauty, I'm sure children will appreciate. There are several children today who learn multiple languages, and we find that they learn it with a passion. We had, a celebration of Tagore, and the children learned Tagore's Bengali songs and they sang it. And people who knew Bengali said, how do they learn it? So a child who's curious, a child who's interested would make an effort to learn. It's that we don't give the space. We say, no, you're doing all unnecessary, unwanted things.
Okay, so that's a good point. Let me, sir, I'm going to ask you one question which is very related to, some of the decisions you took when you were at CBSE, but I'm going to come to Sita first. Sita, how many, students in international schools, since you're also the president of all the international schools heads and you communicate them, uh, do students choose Indian languages like Sanskrit as an additional language, or would they prefer a French or a Spanish?
So I will extend the answer to the question that you have given to Srividya and then
Right.
give my answer to the question you've given me.
Yes.
The philosophy of protecting languages for me is, I remember long back reading a book called Wayfinders by Wade Davis, who's a resident explorer of National Geographic. Okay, there's one line in that book which says that with every man dying somewhere or every woman dying somewhere in some part of the world, the knowledge that exists in that language is dying. Okay, the reason we have to protect languages is because if we think all knowledge exists in English, we are totally wrong. It's a disaster if we think like that. And why, if you remember, everybody used to say, oh, this is all Greek and Latin to me. What is Greek and Latin? A lot of language was documented in Greek and Latin, and even now, not even 40% has been translated into English. So if that is the case with that, you imagine every language, every old man, old woman living in those remote villages who have never seen Apollos or Fortis hospitals, but survived very well with native knowledge. I still remember, you said I'm a trekker. One of my treks in Himalayas, in Himachal, we were almost at an altitude of 14,000 feet. And we were coming down and we saw this old couple. They must, you can't make out their age in the hills, by the way, but I'm sure they must be 65, 70 plus. And they were taking their herd up into the mountain regions. Okay. And nothing, they don't have a suitcase with them. There are no clothes with them. Okay. And there are no medicines, like how we carry medical kit. So in our Hindi and in their broken Himachali, we asked him, what are you going to do? We're going to stay here for 3 months because our buffaloes have to graze now. Okay. So how will you survive if you have, fever, cold? They showed us different shrubs in the mountains that if I have cold, I'll eat this. If I have fever, I'll eat this. Okay, imagine the language, the knowledge that exists with them is dying down because nobody is making an effort to go there, meet them, learn the language, and that's only a 0.0001% I'm talking about. How much more they must be knowing? The reason we have to protect languages is to protect the knowledge and wisdom that exists in this world. That's the extension of the answer to the first question. Now, the second part you asked is, as long as you show the relevance and significance of language, and like Sri Vidya said, you don't get into the structure. Don't start talking about the semantics of language. Start talking about the beauty of the language. Language is your tool to communicate with the world. Whether it's an international school, don't our Indian kids learn the languages when they go to other countries? And when they learn Spanish or when they learn French or Mandarin or whatever may be the language, they learn the culture of that country. I have, I'm basically located in Hyderabad. I have many students who are not from the southern part of the country who join the school and who have to take third language as Telugu. Okay. And I know many of them who said, oh, why should I learn Telugu? I said, why should you not learn Telugu? Who says that you need not learn Telugu? You are staying in a state. You might as well understand the culture of that state. You will make an effort, extra effort to learn it if you're in a different country. Why not in your own country? So the reason, what we do, whether it's an international school or any school for that matter, I think what we have to do is show the relevance and significance of learning the language. And yes, we should not make that language as a painful assignment for children. We should make it as a beautiful experience for them. And
I think
I
I totally agree.
seriously wish that it is taken out of the examination mode and brought into an experience mode. Then everything is lovable.
I think what you're saying is absolutely correct, and I appreciate your bringing that point in the end about examination also. That we instead of examination, we need to focus on experiencing a language, because that is exactly the question that I had in my mind when I was going to go to Balaji. So Sanskrit was taken by a lot of students in class 10th in the board exams, not because they wanted to connect to the culture of India or the texts in Sanskrit, but the fact was that Sanskrit was the only subject at that time in which, apart from math, you could score a perfect 100, right? I mean, that's how people had been choosing, because it's an easy language to learn, and that was the logic behind them. So, is there a mindset issue in also learning languages just for the sake of getting marks?
Yes, Atul, before I come to answer your question, which I've got a right answer for you, I would like to say only three sentences. One, language is a vehicle of culture. Two, language is a vehicle of emotional content. Three, language is also a vehicle for humanization, right? So the objective of a language is not, as rightly pointed out, to grammatically being right, but to ensure that you have a holistic human being being developed. Therefore, whether you are PG in maths, whether you are in PG in social science, doesn't matter. Language is common to all people, to all faculties and all disciplines, because that perfects the human development. Number one. The second, the question that you asked for, Sanskrit, I just wanted to tell you that in the board when I was there, I was dealing with nearly about 80 different levels of languages. For example, all the languages under the Article 8 of the Constitution, and also languages like, probably you said, endangered languages. Some names you might not have even known: Limbu, Lepcha, Bhutia, Ao, Ta, right? These kinds of languages at two different levels, one for up to class 10, and then at the 11th class board at the core level and the elective level. And imagine how difficult it would have been to set question papers for all these languages and through, right? So number one. Second point, what I would like to say, what you talked about Sanskrit, is that, the Sanskrit was taken not as because people wanted it, because that was close to Devanagari script and what do you call Hindi. Because in the three language formula, the provision existed that you had to take, mother tongue and two Indian languages, one of which has got to be Hindi. So all people in the northern belt took Hindi being the mother tongue as the first subject, English being the second one, and the Kothari Commission recommended a third language, which is probably a South Indian language, but that was not taken through. Therefore, the option was available to Sanskrit. In 1988, the board, when Dr. Singha was the chairman, we went to the court saying that Sanskrit is a classical language and not the modern language, and therefore that has been taken out. But there was a big debate when the court ruled that Sanskrit is as modern as any other language, and therefore the children should have the option for that. And if you look at the evaluation pattern, it is not only Sanskrit, but also French, but also many regional languages where the scoring rate is very, very high. and the numbers come only because in the northern belt there is a proportion of studying Hindi is much better, Sanskrit is much better, and therefore they could feel more at home with that, and therefore the performances were reflected. But the same was true in respect of all other languages like Sindhi, like Tamil, Telugu. I could say the 90 plus score was very high in all the languages, right? That's also because of the evaluation system, because the teachers felt that they are my people, and therefore they were quite liberal. These are all several factors come into that being.
Right.
So I don't think you should talk on Sanskrit.
But thank you for clarifying that, because I always felt that Sanskrit was the only language where 90 plus scores used to happen. So it's time for me to begin taking questions from the audience. Anybody who wants to ask a question, I'm going to be monitoring the question and answer board, and I would start from there and start allowing you to ask questions. So, Seema Behel, you have a question. Would you like to ask that question? Sudhanshu, yeah, Seema, can you unmute yourself and ask your question, please?
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Hello. Yes, sir, I would like to just share what I have experienced, that in schools we notice that there is a respect for one's own culture. But if you see, how do we instill respect for other cultures in the students right from the early age? Because tolerance is something which we must concentrate on right from the beginning. So if we can have some suggestions for that, sir.
Seema, Sita, can you take up that question?
Sure. I'm glad she asked that question, Seema. Thanks for that, because as I said earlier, we as schools have the primary responsibility to build the moral fabric of the society. Okay. I know many schools have cultural shows, regional shows, family days, grandparents' days, and things like that. But what is more important is the conversations after that event. What is it that you liked in the show of Gujarat culture, or what is it that you liked in the show of Bhojpuri culture, and why is it so beautiful? How old is it? When you build a respectful conversation around that cultural show, that is when you acquire a larger meaning to the entire thing. In schools, we need to have events, not events, but they should be based on concepts and ideologies that I'm going to make use of this event to build this respect. I'm going to make use of this show to build this humanity or humanism in the children. So I'll give you one simple example if I'm not taking too much time. So we had this Dashera festival. Okay. About 15 years back in our school, like we are a school in South. I worked for many years in the North. And when I moved to Hyderabad and I joined this school, there's one thing that I wanted to blend the cultures. So, and also go beyond religion, because the most sensitive thing in our country is talking about religion. And we schools have to make only humanism as religion, not Hinduism, Islam, Christianity, and all that. So I always told one thing, that your respecting your God is like love for your mother. You keep it in your heart, you don't flash it everywhere. Similarly, what did we do for Dashera? Dashera is not a Hindu festival, Muslim festival, Christian festival. It's a human festival. So what did we do? We started having Ram Leela in Hyderabad. Ram Leela is only done up north usually. So we gave a new interpretation to it, saying that this is triumph of good over evil. Now let's see what are the little bad habits that we have, or not so good habits that we have inside us. Let's make a list of it and burn it along with Ravan. Okay. So for us, Ram Leela has become Good Habits Festival, burning the bad habits and preserving the good in us. Why I gave this example is 15 years, trust me, even my alumni send their bad habits by mail now, so that when we do the Ravan effigy burning, we burn their bad habits, because it's become a kind of a positive reinforcement. What schools have to do is invest a little more time around the same grandparents event and bring in that kind of new significance to it. That is how you can build respect to the others' cultures.
That's a very good point. I think that's an excellent point. Sheetal, do you want to ask your question since you raised your hand? Sudhanshu, can Sheetal be unmuted?
No, sir. No, sir. I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead, Sheetal. Sheetal, do you have a question?
I don't think she has a question.
Okay, great. So her question was up. Now, this is a very Archana Sharma. Are you there? Archana Sharma, do you have, can you unmute yourself?
Yes, sir.
Okay, go ahead.
Can
I
you
think
hear
you
me?
have a very unique question, so I'll allow you to come in.
Okay, sir. Actually, I'm teaching Hindi in class
Question,
1.
but I'll still allow you to come in.
Hello, can you hear me, sir?
Yes, Archana, go ahead.
Sir, I'm teaching Hindi in class 1. So far, since many years, I have been teaching Hindi, and I'm using pictures of different cultures. Like we teach EVS also, and we talk about Sikhism, Hinduism, and Jainism, and lots of other religions. But now this time, yesterday when I was sitting, I just switched on the TV and I heard a news about France where that teacher was killed in the school. I think you might have heard this. So what he did, he used a cartoon picture of Muhammad Prophet. So next week, I am also going to teach O Ki Matra, where I have a picture of Maulavi. So should I go ahead with that? Because I'm afraid now. What should we do? It's a very
Yeah, that's the reason why I asked you to pose your question. So, Shri Vidya, I'm going to let that come to you. And anybody else who wants to pitch in, all the panelists, please feel free. Yeah, so Balasar, I'll get you after Shri Vidya on this. So go ahead, ma'am.
Again, the tolerance part, which Sita spoke about, we as a society are waiting for opportunity to actually say we and they. Okay, we always look at anybody who's different as the other. That is the reason why all these differences crop up. If we use maybe the Malvi and maybe some other examples also, which will convey the same matra, I don't think people are going to take an offense. It's only when we try to target and say this is the only example I have, then people start looking at whether you're giving it, presenting it in a negative way, or whether you're trying to actually deify somebody. So it again appears to be, how am I going to present it in my class? So if I can come up with some other examples, and in the process, if this comes up also, take it take it in your flow, rather than having that as the only word that you're going to use for introducing the matra. That would be my
Okay.
response to that.
I
Balasar,
just want
please
to
go ahead.
interfere.
Yeah.
You see, it's very important for teachers to understand that when there are social conflicts on issues, we need to draw the Lashman Rekha, right? Not because let me tell my own personal example as in the CBSE, a very simple story of what do you call the about the life of Valmiki landed me in such a serious problem when we said how Valmiki evolved himself and then wrote this Ramayana. I had to face a very serious court case because there are people who really are very sensitive to the kind of issues over there. Therefore, my only suggestion to all the teachers is that in pedagogy, you got 100 ways of teaching. So if you find something offensive where there is a conflict, please try to avoid that in a classroom. For personal discussions, they are okay, but not for social platforms.
Okay, so Bala's advice is avoid it if you can, and be very, very cautious sometimes, because see, what happens is all of us are very sensitive about our own cultures. And it's quite easy for us to get hurt if we see our culture misrepresented. It's not just about one religion or other religion. I think it happens universally everywhere. I'm very sure every religion has that issue. So we need to be considerate on how we are using those symbols, and use them appropriately. We have an anonymous attendee who wants to know if Urdu and Arabic uh, in English schools, will they be also considered second language?
Why
I
not?
don't know what the policy says, sir. Bala sir.
Why not? As a matter of fact, the question was raised right in the beginning whether there could be an alternative to Hindi in countries in Gulf. I think CBSE has got its own rules of facilitating exemption from the third language and provision of other options for the second language. So people, when they go to the examination bylaws and check for that, they will know. But I do think that for children in the countries, other countries, well, especially with the new education policy, you have got several options.
So that's great. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Urdu and Arabic can be part of the third language. We are nearing the end. We always end at 6 o'clock sharp. Punctuality is something ICSL loves to practice and promote. And therefore, in the last 5 minutes, I'll request each of my panelists to give their closing remarks in 1 minute and leave 2 minutes for me to wrap up the program in the end. So, going, through reverse order in which we started, I'll ask Bala sir to go first and give his closing statement. Sir.
Only one thing I would like to say: language, culture, art are all integrated together. Let us not try to look at it. What is important is we are not keen on making everybody an artist, but a sense of art appreciation, aesthetics, and art sensitivity. Similarly, cultural sensitivity is very important. So the purpose of education is not to develop specialists, but to create sensitivities with regard to different domains. I think that's a job that we need to do.
Thank you so much, sir. Sita, you want to go next?
Yeah, so
Your
sure.
closing statement.
So I always say one thing, that destiny of a nation begins in its classrooms. We are completely responsible for what we say or don't say in our classrooms. We are completely accountable to a child who goes into our classroom and passes through our school for making a difference in the society. So we need to be highly informed, highly educated, extremely open-minded. We, when I say we teachers, so that we can achieve the destiny of this country as a beautiful country.
Thank you so much, Sita. Thank you very much. Srividya, your last closing
Yes.
comments.
You spoke of, how when parents insist on machine learning and artificial intelligence, how do you actually change the script? Maybe they don't have that kind of inclination to promote art, heritage, culture in the child. So if the schools also don't expose children, children would be, we would be failing our next generation. So I think just because parents say, I want my child to do X, Y, Z, it doesn't mean that school should only do that X, Y, Z. You do that X, Y, Z, in addition, do the ABC, which the child is going to savor, appreciate, and it needs. Because it's, I've read somewhere, it's education that kills creativity. So if we need creative children, we need to give them that space to explore the creative domain. The spatial intelligence also needs to be encouraged and nurtured. That is what I would say.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you. There are three purposes that national education policy wants to fulfill through this policy. The first objective is to make sure that our students, when they grow up, they become problem solvers, critical thinkers. And I think that is something that they would need as they enter the knowledge economy, a connected economy, a global economy. And also, it is required if India wants to be Atmanirbhar and India wants to be self reliant, India wants to be a country of entrepreneurs. I think that kind of mentality is required in the next generation, which is right now in our schools. The second very important part that the policy wants to achieve is to make sure that every student is a valuable citizen of India. He contributes to the society, to the neighborhood, to people around him. He follows the Constitution of India, follows and performs the duty of the citizenship that is required from every person who is a citizen of India. And I think that is also a big objective which the schools need to fulfill. The third very important objective is to make our students cultural ambassadors. It's very, very important that our students are proud to be Indian. They understand that we are a great nation. We have a rich heritage. We have the culture. We appreciate different dance forms. We don't need to wait for America to make yoga popular. We don't need to wait for America to make turmeric one of the most selling
Effective.
spices in the world. We don't need to wait for America to tell us the kind of richness that we have in India. I think we should become spokespeople, and that is also the job of the schools that need to be done. The reason why we Friday at 5 is becoming one of the most popular weekly episodes is, first, we are the only ones who are doing it every week. Obviously, nobody else is doing it. So that makes us very popular. And the second is we have great minds coming here and sharing their thoughts, sharing their ideas throughout the nation. So I am very, very thankful to all my panelists. I'm also very thankful um, to one of the schools that has joined us because Friday at 5 has now become a mode of continuous professional development for schools. When teachers come to our show and they spend 1 hour every week with us, they learn so much about education that schools have started signing up. And the latest school to do that is St. Francis Convent School from Agra. I welcome all the teachers of that school also who were able to join us today. And I hope that all of you stay safe, stay well. It's 6:01, so have a great weekend. Enjoy education. Be happy. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you next week. Thank you.